everybody, and welcome back to another video on the channel. We are back again with my tips for the upcoming round 8. Let's first of all go through my round 7 tips. 6 out of 9. That was a pretty average score. I feel like it was a pretty easy round to tip. I went with a couple of upsets and they didn't get across the line. Yeah, just another average round of tipping, like pretty much every round for me this season so far. I went with Adelaide. I wasn't backing in Fremantle, even though it was in Perth. I just didn't have the trust in them. But they look like a different team in Perth this year compared to pretty much everywhere else. So yeah, I guess I probably got to be a little bit more confident in Fremantle, at least on their home deck going forward. GWS in Canberra, I didn't expect the Bulldogs to win that one. The Dogs look like a good team this year. You know, despite their injury concerns that they've had throughout the start of the season, they've fought on. They look like a united team. Carlton, they got the job done over Geelong, and I didn't see that one coming. You know, they did have 2 good wins against 2 bottom teams. I guess they built confidence from that, but I thought that coming up against an actual decent team that they would falter. They didn't. And then, yeah, the last game of the round, Hawthorn, that was a pretty simple tip, that one. But yeah, it was just another average round of tipping for me. Let's get on to round 8. Thursday night footy to start off the round. Essendon taking on North Melbourne. Essendon are 3 wins and 3 losses. I had to double check that one, but I forgot that their opening round game got postponed. That's going to be weird to look at for the rest of the season, seeing them and Gold Coast 1 game behind everyone else. Anyways, so they had 3 wins in a row, but crashed back to reality against Collingwood, who are clearly a much better team than them this year. They really handed them a football lesson. North Melbourne, a little bit better against Port Adelaide. It took coming up against old teammate Jason Horne-Francis to really fire them up. They maybe got a bit of the rub of the green, which probably isn't usually the case for North Melbourne. And they didn't start that game off well, but they managed to hang in there. It was definitely a much better performance than their previous couple of weeks. Essendon, you know, a couple weeks ago against the Eagles, they were probably expected to win by a bit more, and they only just clawed over the line. I think we've seen that a number of times in the last few years with Essendon against West Coast and North Melbourne. When they've been expected to win by a lot, they only just managed to claw over the line. I think this probably could be another scenario of that happening, so I'm going to tip them to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's in a really scrappy, close game that, you know, you look at and you think maybe they didn't deserve to win that, but they just get over the line because of how poor their opponents are. So I'm going to tip Essendon to win this one by 8 points. St Kilda versus Fremantle. Saints coming off a bad loss, Fremantle coming off a good win. You would think that Fremantle will carry that form into this week, but I don't know. I feel like this is the exact type of game that St Kilda would win, one that they're not expected to win after a couple of really bad performances in a row. Meanwhile, Fremantle travelling to Melbourne, coming off a good win, expected to ride the high and take that form into next week. I feel like we've seen this scenario a number of times over the last few years. I remember a couple years ago, I think St Kilda managed to claw their way over the line over in Perth in a game they probably weren't expected to win. It's the reverse this time around. Yeah, there's no real logic behind me tipping the Saints in this one, but it just feels like a really St Kilda thing to do for them to win this, and a really Fremantle thing to do for them to lose this. So I'm going to tip them in a close one by 10 points, the Saints. Bulldogs taking on Port Adelaide on the planet of Mars. First time, I believe, that the Dogs have played in Ballarat this year. So they're coming off some good form. You know, they've got Bont back. They're looking, all systems go, like a united, cohesive group. Port Adelaide, you know, in better form now, but not really a great game over North Melbourne last week. At the moment, I think I probably have more confidence in what the Dogs are doing. You know, maybe on paper, Port Adelaide have a better lineup, but I think the Dogs, they just look like they're a team on a mission. and it's at their second home ground, so I want to tip them to win this one. Let's go by 21 points. Adelaide versus Carlton. This is an interesting matchup. It's a home game for the Crows. They've played very well at Adelaide Oval so far this year. Carlton coming off 3 wins in a row, 2 against bottom teams, but their last win was very impressive over the Cats. I thought that was a very good win, especially when the Cats came hard at them late. At the Crows' home deck, though, I think they should bounce back. They're clearly a much better team at home than they are away. That's been the case for a few years now, and I think they should bounce back, but it should be a very entertaining game of footy. Let's go the Crows by 12 points. This is potentially game of the round. Collingwood taking on Geelong. I feel like perhaps I've slightly overrated the Cats at the start of the season. I really thought they were going to be up there with one of the best teams in the competition. They're, 4 wins and 3 losses. You know, they've shown some really good signs, but they've just had... There seems to be a few chinks in their armour. Jeremy Cameron, I feel like I've watched him a few times now, and he's sitting on 17 goals and up there with some of the leading goal scorers in the competition, but it doesn't seem like he's at his best at the moment. So I guess that's just his ridiculously high standards. I really thought that was a good opportunity to get a statement win over Carlton. It looked like they were coming back at the end of that game, but they just couldn't get over the line. A few skill errors, a few sloppy mistakes in that last quarter, and Carlton got the job done. You know, Collingwood, ever since that round 1 belting at the hands of the Giants, they haven't put a foot wrong. They are travelling beautifully at the moment. I thought they were going to be a good team, and so far they're living up to at least my expectations. At the MCG, I feel like they're due a loss though. 6 wins in a row. I feel like they've got to lose another one eventually. The Cats, I still rate them as a very good team. This is going to be a fantastic game though. They might have a couple players back. Lockie Schultz, I believe, is potentially due back this week. Dan McStay does go out of the team, so a forward for a forward, albeit they aren't quite the same players. But yeah, I think the Cats bounce back in this one. It should be a cracking game, but wouldn't be surprised if Collingwood got over the line because they are in cracking form at the moment. But I am going to go the Cats to bounce back at the MCG, win this one by 2 points. Eagles versus Melbourne. This is probably going to be just about up there with the worst game of the round. You know, the Eagles, they're still winless. Can they get the job done? Can they get their first win of the season over Melbourne, who, despite having won their last 2 games, still probably aren't travelling the best. You know, 2 wins, 5 losses, still in the bottom 4, but looking much better in their last 2 games. A bit of a switch up in their game plan. They, finally figured out after 4 years of not living up to their expectations that maybe it was time to tinker with the game plan a little bit. They've finally done that, and they look a much better team because of it. Still don't really rate them as a realistic finals chance or anything like that, but I think they should get the win over the Eagles, who they've got to get a win eventually, but I don't know. I just don't know when it's going to come. It very easily could happen this week, to be fair. I think this is probably as good of a chance as any they've had this season so far to notch up their first win. But I am just going to go with the safe pick and tip Melbourne by 10 points. Sydney versus GWS, crosstown rivals going head-to-head in this one. Now, I really don't rate our chances of winning this one at all, the Swans. We've looked pretty ordinary in the last few weeks. That game against Gold Coast, that was a really frustrating one. I mean, we were in a great position to at least make a fistful of that game against a good opposition, but 12 goals in a row in the third quarter and early into the fourth quarter, that's just not good enough. Clearly we've got some injury issues. Clearly we haven't quite adapted to Dean Cox's system so far, but we are looking very shaky at the moment. Not a lot of key positional depth in our list, it doesn't look like. Both in the forward line and the back line. Yeah, we've got some we've got some holes to patch up on our list, clearly, even with the injury issues that we have had. And I think even though the Giants have lost their last couple, I still think they're a much better team than us, and they're probably going to win this one comfortably, to be honest. I'm going to tip them by 40 points. Hawthorn taking on Richmond now. The Tigers, last couple of games have been a little bit better, but the Hawks, well, they started off the season on fire, but they've been a little bit shaky in the last few rounds now, even with their win over the Eagles. I don't think anyone has said it was overly impressive, despite winning by 50 points. They should get the job done here against the Tigers, though. I think they're comfortably the better team. They'll probably win by a similar margin to what they did last week. I'll go 41 points. And now, final game in the round, Q Clash. Well, this potentially could be the game in the round. Both teams are in the top 4 currently. Both teams are sitting with only one loss to their name and in very good form. This is the first time in the history of the Q Clashes that both teams are sitting in the top 8 at the time of these two teams playing. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. It goes to show how bad Gold Coast have been throughout their history, and also the Lions' early days, in the Q Clashes at least. But yeah, this is going to be a cracking game. I think at the Gabba, I would back in the Lions to win this one. You know, they had a very good win over St Kilda. They, up until that point, hadn't been playing great in the first half, but they were leading comfortably at halftime in that game. So perhaps Chris Fagan revved them up a little bit more than usual going into the game, and whatever he did, it worked. So is that issue fixed now? It's only a 1-week sample size, but if they can fix up their first half issues, they're going to be a very dangerous team. You know, Kai Lohmann goes out again. He came back in from injury last week, but he goes straight back out. Will that affect them too much? Well, they won, 5 games in a row without him, so I don't really think so. I think even though the Suns, they have looked very impressive, they probably just need to do a little bit more to really convince me. Most of the teams they've come up against so far this year were very low down on the ladder last year. That was actually their first game in the season where I think they were playing a team that didn't finish in the bottom 5 last year. Although, admittedly, the Swans aren't looking like a top-of-the-table team this year. So, yeah, I think I'm going to tip the Lions by 14 points. Should be a cracking game, though. That brings us to the end of round 8. The ladder, we've got Brisbane back up on top of the ladder, Collingwood in second, Hawthorn and Gold Coast rounding out the top 4, GWS, Adelaide, Geelong and the Bulldogs up into the top 8. Fremantle just sliding back outside in 9th position. Port Adelaide, Essendon, St Kilda, Carlton in 13th position. Melbourne managed to claw their way out of the bottom 4 according to my tips. Sydney all the way down into 15th, and then the bottom 3 pretty much the same as it has been for a few rounds now. So that is going to bring an end to this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. Comment down your predictions for the upcoming round. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.